Despite widespread speculation, Prime Minister Anthony Albanese will not be calling the federal election this weekend. Rumours have been flying in the wake of the Reserve Bank's decision to cut interest rates for the first time in over 4 years, with many believing this could be the trigger for an early election. However, speaking on Sydney's Gold radio station, Mr. Albanese cheekily brushed off the idea, saying, "I spoke to someone this morning who was absolutely convinced that I'm driving to Government House this Sunday to call the election." The Prime Minister also laughed at the radio host's suggestion that April 12th could be the chosen date, pointing out that everyone's just taking a punt at this stage. Rather than adding to the speculation, he used the opportunity to call for a discussion on fixed 4-year terms, saying, "This is a strong argument for 4-year fixed terms. We've made several attempts at referendums in this country, but we'll have elections due by May 17th or earlier." For an election to be officially called, the Prime Minister must visit the Governor-General in Canberra, usually on a Sunday. This visit leads to the issuing of legally binding documents called writs, which authorize the election and kickstart the formal process. The campaign must run for at least 33 days but no more than 58 days, so the window is relatively tight. Treasurer Jim Chalmers acknowledged that elections can create uncertainty for businesses but noted there hasn't been any major hesitation in the economy so far. Speaking to ABC Radio on Wednesday morning, he emphasized that the final decision rests with the Prime Minister. "I wouldn't think he has made a decision yet," he said. "He'd be considering all his options. There has to be an election in the next 3 months, of course, so he's thinking about it and weighing it up." Australians will head to the polls within the next 3 months, but exactly when remains a mystery. Speculation about an early election has been bubbling away throughout the latter half of the Labor government's term, particularly following the Reserve Bank's interest rate cut. Right now, mid-April seems like the most likely timeframe. Under the Constitution, elections must follow strict timing rules. Terms for the House of Representatives last 3 years, and an election must be held no later than 68 days after their expiration. However, the Senate complicates things. Half of all senators' terms expire on June 30th, 2025, meaning an election for those seats must be held beforehand. Since House of Representatives and half Senate elections are almost always held together, the absolute latest date for the next federal election is May 17th, 2025. Despite the government refusing to give anything away, one date keeps popping up: April 12th. Why? If Mr. Albanese wants to wait until after the Western Australian state election on March 8th to call the federal election but also avoid clashing with Anzac Day public holidays in the East, April 12th is pretty much his only option. Another factor in the timing is the budget. After delivering 2 consecutive surpluses, the government is expected to post a deficit, sparking speculation that Albanese could call the election before March 25th to sidestep delivering bad financial news. On the flip side, if the government chooses to press ahead with the budget and offer some cost-of-living relief first, the election could be pushed back into May. Treasurer Chalmers remains tight-lipped on whether the budget will proceed as scheduled. The timing of the election is a matter for the Prime Minister in consultation with his senior colleagues, he said on February 18th. But we are working towards that budget. Meanwhile, the media frenzy over the election date continues. As Albanese joked back in November, "I've read that the election will be in August, September, November, December. December 7's probably past now." He reiterated his support for 4-year terms, arguing that it would put an end to the constant guessing game that starts halfway through each term. Before the Reserve Bank's decision to cut interest rates on February 18th, many political commentators believed the government would wait for this moment before heading to the polls. Now that the cut has come through, the first since 2020, Albanese has a solid economic win to campaign on. After 3 years of rising prices and interest rates, the government can now claim that their economic policies are starting to pay off. Nine political editor Charles Croucher summed it up, saying, "That's what the government will be saying today, that all the pain Australians have suffered, all the pain the government has taken tightening the belt, has been worth it. They've now got a rate cut in their back pocket. But did it come fast enough? Is it big enough? Who knows?" What it does give them, though, is a springboard into an election. Despite the speculation, one thing is clear: the government won't be using any recent legislation as a trigger for a double dissolution. They managed to push through a hefty batch of bills in the final sitting days of 2024, closing the door on that possibility. It's also worth mentioning that double dissolutions are pretty rare. While we had one as recently as 2016, there have only been 6 others in Australian history. When discussing his preference for four-year terms, Mr. Albanese pointed to the failed attempts to move Australia towards becoming a republic. "We know referendums are hard to win in this country," he said. Just like there was misinformation around The Voice, there was also misinformation about four-year terms. People said it would be terrible, that politicians would cling to power, but it's actually just common sense. Every state and territory already has four-year terms, just not at the federal level. At this stage, the earliest an election can be called is August this year, but it's looking increasingly likely that Australians will be heading to the polls well before then. That's all for today's coverage. Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon to stay updated on all the latest news. Cheers!